Hello and welcome to one of many lectures in this video series for regional debate development within New Zealand. This is a video series meant to help debaters across New Zealand at a high school level, particularly those in the regions, improve their debating. In this lecture, what I'm going to chat to you about is building a substantive, how you do it, what it is. All of these are questions I'm going to answer for you today. But before I jump into it, if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, I encourage you to grab them out and take some notes, because it's great to listen to these lectures. It's even better if you get out a pen and paper and you take some notes. And I'll tell you a secret, actually. It's actually at its very best when you take those notes after listening to the lecture, and you get the opportunity to practice them in a debate, in your next practice. That's what I encourage you to do after this video. Okay, let's jump into it. So, what is a substantive? I'm going to be honest with you guys. A substantive is just a fancy debate word. There's nothing to be worried about. A substantive is a fancy word in debating for a point. Over the course of the debate, when are you going to use them? Because that will make a bit more sense. You'll have 3 substantive points, which are points that are proving that your point is true. And you'll have 2 in your first speech and 1 in your second speech. The one in the second speech can also be known as a split point. So don't get confused if that's what they call that third substantive. Also, I think it's important to note that the first speech should have the best 2 substantives in it. Okay, why do you actually need to know this, you're probably wondering? Well, quite simply, I assume you guys want to win more debates. And substantives, without good ones, you cannot win debates. It doesn't matter how good everything else is, substantives are a must for winning debates. As a first and second speaker, you'll be using them in your speeches. As a third speaker, you're like, well, when do I use them? And when you use them is in the prep room, when you're helping your first and second speaker prep their speeches. Also, the truth is, in a later lecture when we cover third speeches, you'll probably get a better idea of how this is going to help you out, because knowing how a point is built helps you when you need to take it apart later on. Perfect. Structure of substantives. 6 key steps to make it work. If you go through and you take off these 6 key steps, you will have a pretty good substantive there. Title is the first step. This is nice and easy. Head up to the judge what it is you're actually going to be talking about. I like to phrase mine as a question that I then go on to answer. But make sure it's specific, make sure it's clear, don't make it too broad. So for example, let's say I'm doing a debate on why we should ban smoking. And this substantive is going to be on what are the health harms of smoking on people who don't smoke, for example. That would be the question I would ask. What are the health harms of smoking on people who don't smoke? Question mark. That's my opening title, lets the judge know what I'm doing. Nice and easy. You guys probably have that down. Roadmap is the second step. This is a quick sentence after your title. It's a little bit of an expansion on it. What it does is it just walks the judge through in the same way that you would use Google Maps when you drive. A roadmap walks the judge through a map of what you're actually going to do in your point. So for example, you might say, okay, you've just done your title and you said, why do drugs, why does smoking, I've switched debate motions for a moment there, why does smoking cause harm to non-smokers? So what you might say then is, I'm going to prove to you today why smoking is harmful to these people. I'm going to prove why there's a lot of these people, and I'm going to prove why it's really, really bad in this debate. Because the judge kind of just gets a little bit more of an outline, kind of the different stages you're going to go through in that speech. Now, you move into context. I'd like to know, context is not needed for every point, but sometimes it is. It's really important to check yourself, make sure you've got any context that is needed. What is needed context? Needed context in a debate is anything that the judge needs to know or assume in your speech that you can't just prove through just debate reasoning, right? These are often scientific facts, basic knowledge, but it's good that you flag to the judge that they should know this. For example, let's continue with our smoking point analogy. Something a judge might need to know is that breathing in smoke can cause lung cancer, it can cause other lung conditions, and all sorts of other diseases become significantly more likely, and this is very harmful. You can't actually prove that through debate reasoning. You can't pull out a scientific station. You need to tell the judge that so they know what they're assuming. What you shouldn't put in context please, 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 do not put things in context that are not true. Your judges are very smart. They know if you're lying to them. So don't tell them that smoking one cigarette is going to kill you, because they're just not going to believe you. Does that make sense? So we've got things that we shouldn't contextualize are made up things that we should contextualize are things that are true, and things that are kind of common knowledge that the average citizen should know to understand this point. Mechanisms. Mechanisms are probably the most important thing that you could have in a debate substantive. And the reason for that is, I would say most substantives are won or lost on their quality during mechanization. You should have 2 to 3 of these mechanisms. You're probably sitting there like, what is a mechanism? You've probably heard the word before from someone else, but you're not quite sure what it is. Once again, fancy debate word. Mechanisms are just reasons why something is true. So we had our title, and you're just trying to give reasons for why that is true. So for example, let's continue with our smoking. One, a couple of reasons for why it might be true. I might do one mechanism, which is about how second-hand smoke is going to harm people. I might do another one on how lots of first-hand smokers getting into hospitals mean the hospital system is clogged up unless they would provide resources to other health conditions. Those are 2 separate mechanisms, and I'll prove them both. I'm not going to run through them fully, I'm just going to pick one and talk you through that. I think the key problem for debaters is they say these 2 things, and then they stop there. Those aren't mechanisms, those are just statements, I might say, when I give them my judgment. And so it's really important to step me through why that's true. So we're going to have my 3 favorite good questions in debating, which are why, and incredibly, why. So let's look at what that looks like. You need to ask yourself why 3 times every time you make a point, at least, if not more. So let's say I make my point that secondhand smoke is harmful to people. So I'm like, okay, if more people are smoking because, it's not banned, therefore what's going to happen is that more people are going to, be smoking, and therefore there's more smoke in the air. Why is that bad? That's bad because people are going to breathe in that smoke, people who live with them, who work with them, who are just in any area that they smoke. So why is that bad? Well, when you breathe in more smoke, as I told you in my context, what's going to happen is they're going to get lung cancer and other diseases, and this is pretty bad for health, which proves my first point. So that's that 3 whys. Sometimes you might need more, but 3 is a really good consistent number. I find mechanisms are very well built when I hear at least 3 mechanisms. Perfect. Next up, we have our 5th step, outcomes. Outcomes are just what have we proven at this point. You'll notice at the end of that why, I got to my proof, which was that there were going to be health harms to the people from secondhand smoke. But the problem is, by the time you've gone through your 2 or 3 mechanisms, the judge might have had 1 or 2 of them slip your mind. So I like to just give them a quick rundown list. I'm like, we proved to you today that there were going to be health harms from secondhand smoke. We proved that there were going to be massive issues in hospital systems. Just giving them like a reminder and a heads up of the things you proved in the point. Nice and easy. It should take only a few moments. Finally, we have our last step, which is impact. And I think the problem in debating is sometimes there are 2 very good teams. One team proves that one thing is true, and the other team over here, they also prove that something else is true and bad. And so the judge sits in the middle and they're like, okay, how do I decide which one of these is worse? And what you say is, here, Judge, I'm happy to lend you a hand with that. So what you do is you say, why is what I'm saying important in this debate? There's 2 key ways you do this. You either say it impacts a lot of people, or you say it impacts a small group of people, but a lot of them. So let's do that for smoking. You might say, okay, does it impact a lot of people? It sure does, because there are a lot of smokers in New Zealand. And the people they work around, live around, and just like generally spend their lives smoking around is a huge proportion of the New Zealand population. And you're like, wow, that's a really big number, Joe. So you care about a lot. On the flip side of that, I could tell you, oh, there is also a huge impact, because there's probably no impact like that's higher level than just things like death, harms, hospital failures. Like these are pretty big deals in the world of debating. So you should care a lot about it because there's a lot of people that are being massively harmed. That's pretty bad. If you can get both, that's great. But often you can't get both. So if you can just get one, that's really, really good if you can achieve that. That's it. I've also actually stuck a bonus tip in here for you. So now that you've got these 6 steps down, you're probably doing a very good job of making substantive points. Like, you know, when I see debaters do this, I'm like, wow, that is really good debating when I'm judging. So, how do you make it even better? You want to let the judge know that you are doing all these steps, because sometimes you guys are talking fast, sometimes the judge misses something, so you want to like make sure they have a really easy time following it, because the more you can put on their paper in a nice order, the easier it is for them to look over it and realize that you're winning the debate, which is what you're hopefully doing with these great substantives. So, signposting does this. What you want to do is each of the stages, with the exception of the title, judges generally know what a title is, you should say what you're doing. So say, I'm going to give you a roadmap. Here are some context points you might need to understand for this. I'm going to give you 3 mechanisms now. What were the outcomes I gave you? What are the impacts and why should you care about this? Like, literally go onto your page and write in like big block letters when you move through each stage of it. 1, it's going to make sure you've ticked every step. But 2, it's going to make sure that you're doing a really, really good job of making sure, you know, you're ticking off everything you need. Perfect. Additional resources. I've got a couple of things for you, because I'm really sorry to tell you guys that I worked really hard to make it so this 10 or so minute video meant that I imported all of my knowledge on substantives into your brain, and you're able to do it perfectly now from now on. Sadly, couldn't get it to work. So some additional stuff that will help you get there. Firstly, I've included a written example. So if you're at any point of this, you are like, oh, I'm a bit unsure what that looks like, you can obviously rewatch it, but I've also got a written example attached that's going to give you an example substantive that walks you through from top to bottom and gives you an example of all the different, like a few different mechanisms, a few different outcomes, and like what that looks like. Second, I encourage you, if you're with a group right now, if you're watching this debate club, I would encourage you to get into groups and practice this. You know, sit down and work through it in like groups of 2 or 3 or maybe more, and like work through building a substantive, making sure you're ticking off each one of those steps as you go. If you're not in a group, that's totally fine as well. You can sit down and do the exact same thing. Prep a point, make sure you're ticking all the steps, then record yourself, and when you listen back, make sure you're doing every one of the steps. To make sure that you are doing one of the steps, I've actually included also a text sheet that has every one of these steps in it. It also helps with some additional added tips and tricks, making sure you're doing why, for example. So that's going to help you really practice through this, do a really good job. I'd also just like to make a little bit of a disclaimer. This is not part of the teaching content of this video. But I'd like to say, is this the only way you can do a substantive? No. Is this the best way you can do a substantive? That's debatable. That's obviously why we're all here, right? So I'd like to say that you might see other debaters do other methods of substantives, but they'll all be reasonably similar and based on the method I've taught you here. So I would encourage you to learn this method, get it really down-packed and very like regular, like every time you do a point, you do it this way. And once you've got it mastered, you can make a few tweaks and adjustments to make it more your own and make it fit your style better. This is the way I do substantives. And I think it's a really, really good way that's like, led me to do very well in debating in New Zealand. So I encourage you to follow this format. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been informative. If you've got any questions, you can always feel free to put them in the comments. I'll try my best to get back to them and answer them for you. But other than that, I hope you guys have the very best of your debate practice and it all goes well. And I'll see you in another lecture. Thank you.